Welcome to my apiary. It's Saturday, February 10th, 2024. I think I'm actually going to trim some plywood today. I've run this one piece through already, so I'll explain to you what I'm doing. I'm running the factory edge along the fence, so that green paint that I put on there, so I'm running that along there, and then the second time I'll either turn it around and run the other factory edge, or I'll just cut along the edge that I did already. And this is my offcut. I did the latter on this one because this edge is not very nice. It's kind of scrappy, so I'll set that aside. So these are cut. This is set at 22 inches, and my pallets are 21 3/4 overall. So I've got a couple options here. This looks pretty good. This will be the back of a pallet, and then this side will be trimmed again once I'm done assembling the pallet. Now these need to be trimmed to 33.5 inches wide, but again, two things I want to do. I want to get rid of this green paint. I want to freshen that up with a nice raw cross cut, but I also want to cut this side because this is the track saw cut, and it's not guaranteed to be perfectly straight, etc. So my second time through, I'll run the factory green paint edge through the saw this way at, what did I say, 33.5. I'll run at 33 5/8, and then I'll flip it around and trim this. I don't need to take much off of that to just clean it up. So if you understand all that, then you're in good shape, because I didn't. But because I don't have a helper, I just have to do a bunch of these, set them aside, and then change gears and do that second trim that I talked about, so that I can finish them off. Then I get to palletize them, stick them in the shed until it's time to assemble. Because I'm having trouble with the edges of this plywood, I'm going to change what I'm doing. I'm going to make it so I can take off the maximum amount at trim time, and what that means is cutting this stuff at 24 inches, and then what that means is that factory edge that ends up at the front of the pallet, I'll have the most waste come off of that. Good news is it won't create any offcuts right now. I'm just cutting these in half. Okay, I'm going to put each one of these through the saw again twice. The final size is 33.5, 33 7/8, so that I can just straighten this edge. And I can leave it 33 7/8, and then when I come back, I can take more off of the factory edge. Because the factory edges seem to be the worst part of this plywood. Okay, we'll go 33.5 now. Well, you can see a lot of this plywood is fine, but you know, I save a little bit of money on plywood, but I'm sure working it off, extra cutting, cutting around the edges, losing more waste. Now look at this. It's just completely delaminated in the center. What I'll do though for this is I'm going to dump a bunch of Type Bond 3 down in there, again increasing costs, and I'll set that on the bottom of the stack for clamping, and that'll be even better than the glue they use at the factory. So now I've got those sides cut, and now I can run that cut edge again and trim it to 33.5. So now I'll go through again. Okay. Cutting off the green part. Well, that's about a third of them, and I'm going to finish these today. I'm kind of played out, but I'll rest for a few minutes, and then I'll do another third, get them processed, and then they're ready for assembly. So they'll wait quite some time, and I have to even buy the 2x4s and the 1x8s still. So that's why I'm kind of concentrating on the plywood at this point. This was, you may have seen my earlier video, this is a D grade plywood that I picked up, kind of hoping that it was good enough for beekeeping equipment, and I will say it is. I'd say it's just barely good enough. There's going to be a lot of culling, there's going to be a lot of cutting around bad spots, so it's not my favorite thing. But with the price of plywood these days, I'm kind of forced into it, to be honest. Trying to keep the price down for the customer without compromising the finished product. And I hope the finished product is as good as he's come to expect. So we'll see, right? There's 40 40 pallet pieces on each of those. And then I've got these to go. And then these are offcuts. Some of them are from last year actually. And a lot of those will be cut up. Well, at least some of them will be cut up for 11-inch covers. I call them 11-inch covers. I don't know why. They're the 6-frame nuke covers. So I have to make some of those for myself and some for another customer. So I'm going to be cutting up a few of those. And then the rest of those can actually be cut. It's, 16 and I don't know, up to 17 for 10-frame covers, because I'm building 200 of those 10-frame covers. That's actually exactly the job I did in November last fall, is 200 of those covers. So we could see that took me a month to do that. So I got to get cracking here. So you can see the pallet wood that I've cut up here. And so that, that'll wait for quite a while until I get all of the other pieces milled up and get into assembly. And then I got into cutting offcuts. So what I've done here is, if you recall, see these pieces are kind of the center of those plywood. I cut the pallet part off of one end and off of the other end, and then this was left in between. I cut a number of those up into 11-inch strips for 6-frame covers, and then I'm cutting these up into 16 and oversized 16 and 5/8, so 16 and 7/8 or so for 10-frame covers. And this is an offcut, so I get 3 of the 10-frame covers cut out of that, left over, and then I can get one that's not as wide as a 10, but it'll make a 6. That's 14 inches. I need just over 11, so it'll make a little strip. I don't know that I'll use that for anything. It may just make firewood. So this D-grade plywood I got, it's not beautiful stuff, but I think it's good enough. There are some delaminations which I will cull out as we go, but most of it's pretty decent. Most of it's laminated pretty good. There's some voids, but again, this is a void here. I'm going to have a 4-inch strip here, not 3-inch strip here. So I'll cut that off of this side, and hopefully I'll get rid of most of that void, and maybe not. But again, I need to cut this to length yet, so I can maybe just zip that right off. So you just work around it. There's going to be a lot of waste, but I think the final product is going to be just fine. So a number of these offcuts, the center of the plywood parts, I've already cut into 11-inch covers here, and that makes up most of what I need for my covers. And I'm going to have a lot of pieces left over, because I've got a lot of these end pieces after cutting the 10-frame cover parts. And this is just 10-frame covers using up offcuts. I haven't even got into the pile to cut 10-frame covers specifically. I'll have over 30 covers here. 30, 35 covers here. And, that'll go a long way. I need 200 covers, though, so I'm still going to get into a lot of plywood. I've got 2 more things I can do here. Cut all of these 10-frame covers, and now I've got all these blanks that are wider and longer than a 6-frame cover, but that length is kind of waste. There's not much I can do with it. But what we can do is we can set this now at 11, and I want to run 11 1/4. And the thing I forgot is I've got a thin kerf blade in here. Because the arbor and the saw is this side and you mount the blade on, the width of the blade will affect the size of your material as indicated on the fence here. So all of my pallets are a 1/16 of an inch too long. Not quite a 1/16 maybe. That's gonna bother me. But I don't think I'm gonna fix it. It's a lot of cutting to fix that. So there's a problem here that I have to solve. It's not a huge problem, and I think I'm going to solve it after I cut these to width. And that problem is, because I used the track saw to cut these offcuts out of the center of the sheets, this line is not necessarily square with this line. So that's a little bit more tricky. What you have to do is you have to run that through the saw this way with a square miter gauge on there, which I have one, and that's what I'll end up doing. So I'm going to cut this off, and then I'm going to kind of demonstrate that for you, how I'm going to do that. I won't do them right away, but I'll just show you one. This is a very high quality miter gauge I bought last year. I really like it. It's very accurate, and it's easily adjustable and repeatable. So you can, if you go off square for any reason, you can just adjust it right back to square really easily. It sits right in the miter slot there. I've adjusted it so there's no play in it. And now what I have to do is, I don't need the stop for this. I need to square one end of this with this, so I can bring this right out. It's a little goofy that all of the adjustments are you need this Allen screwdriver thing, but that's okay. It works very well. So it's immaterial how much I cut off here, and see that the difficulty is always it pulls back off of the table by the time I get the workpiece this side of the blade. I can back the blade up a little bit if I lower it, but not much. So that's kind of my problem. See, it moves down there and is difficult. So what you can also do with this one, I can't do it as much. I would have to completely reconfigure this to do it, but you can also take your miter gauge and turn it around and run it in the other way. I don't move my fence and everything, so you can run that in the other way, but you have to get your miter gauge this side of the blade. So you can start your miter gauge there, put your workpiece here, and run it through the saw that way. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. To do that, I think I would have to clear this all away and get the miter gauge in this slot, and work on the right side of the blade, which I might do. I'm going to cut all these to width first, and then I'll decide which way I want to approach that. look like it, but my fingers are not running over the throat plate, which is a safety margin. So that's what I'm left with. People ask me quite a bit, well, can't you use that for a shim on the pallet or a runner or something? You can, but as you can see, plywood delaminates pretty easily, especially after it ages. And another thing I'll show you is that a lot of the problems with this plywood show up on the edge of the sheet. So it's nice to be able to cut kind of out of the center of the sheet and get those edges cut off. I mean, these are the only two that are like that in that whole stack. So it's actually, you know, it's not that bad. You lose some, but it's not really that bad. For my next trick, I want to run a consistent square edge. I want to take my miter gauge and run this through to make this edge nice and square. These are pretty square, but I do make my covers fit quite tightly, so I don't want them being out of square at all. Now that was easy on the 11-inch covers. However, I need to do that to all these big covers. So that might require turning the miter gauge around as I described. But before I do that, I'm going to size these to length. And I'm going to cross cut on the table saw, which is not the best idea. Okay, I have to remember that this is my square end. So I need to bring this across and cross cut it like so. It's a little dicey. Typically you don't want to cross cut things that are real narrow, because that gives them the opportunity to twist in here and bind on the blade, and it can really kick and be dangerous. I don't know what the rule is. This I feel I can do safely. I have a riving knife, so if the workpiece twists this way, it will have a very hard time getting into contact with the back of the blade here. But you need to be careful if you're doing this. If you have a saw that doesn't have a riving knife, if you're not as experienced, don't do this. I've got a nice sharp blade, so I don't have to give much pressure to push the piece through. I'm going to measure this because well, I've got it just about right. It's 20 1/8. I want these, no, I don't want it. I want it to be 20 5/8. Because I want a 1/2 inch for my rabbits. I think I'm going to leave that right there. Okay, so we cross cut these. I've cleaned off the table saw here, and today I'm going to slice up some plywood. Now I've got 18, I believe, sheets of plywood here. I'm going to cut those up into 17. I think I'm going to cut them into 18-inch strips, and that'll leave me with about a 12-inch strip, which will then make 6 frame covers, 11-inch covers, 6 frame covers. The 18-inch strips then will ultimately be sized down to make a 10 frame cover, which is 16 5/8 finished size. But before any of that, I'm using paste wax to wax the table saw, because the sheets are kind of heavy, and it does help a lot to wax the cast iron top so that it's slick. Usually wax this once a year, and it's a good time because, like I say, the sheets are heavy. I don't usually cut full sheets on the table saw. I decided to use the table saw versus the track saw for this because I have, if you know my complaint about the track saw is it's only as accurate as your pencil mark and how good you can line up that track. And the actual little track saw that I have, the way the track connectors are designed, it's kind of impossible for that track to be straight. It's always going to be in an arc, and that's not good. That's not good at all. So I've done this one already. I'll buff that off. Wax on, wax off. I'll lower that blade so I don't slip into it. I've waxed the throat blade as well, the whole way over. This black part is melamine. It's plenty slippery already. Okay, I can feel that's really nice now. Very slick. The wood chips don't bother anything. It just goes from sticky to slick suddenly. You can buff it, and it's difficult, and then suddenly it just turns into a slippery surface. Okay, that's beautiful now. Boy, that's nice, slippery. Very slippery. All right. So the weather's been pretty crazy. Yesterday I was looking at the forecast, and I think the forecast high today was -2, which is very warm for a winter day here. So I was making big plans. I thought, well, I'll clean out the shop, I'll open the big doors, and get this pile of pallets in here so I can get my plywood in. Then I can just slide them across. And I woke up and it was -22 outside. It was not warm at all. But it's starting to warm up. The sun is very bright, and it's just fine. Opening the doors for a little while is okay. The heaters start up and whatnot, but everything in here is warm, so it recovers pretty fast once I close the doors. Not very elegant. Not As you can see, I kind of could use 4 feet of outfeed on there, but I'll manage. I think I'm going to cut these at 18. That's because by flipping it over like that, I can get my offcut out of the center, and I don't need to leave as much material for that. Typically, the problems with this plywood, as you can see here, like here, and there's a void here, are on the outside, hence why I want to mark that. And on the inside, it's actually pretty good, right? So if I leave more meat on these, because they have the outside edge, then I can make these narrower, and they'll be 2 inside edges, which are generally a bit better than the outsides. That one is almost flawless, really, on the edge. There's a bit of a knot there, but yeah, so I think that's what I'm gonna do. So you can see how that goes. It's sufficient amount of effort. When I set up my shop, I specifically left my workbench less than 8 feet from my blade so that I could use it as an in-feed support. Now, it's still enough effort I have in the past made a jig. It's nice that they made the table, I think it's 3/4 of an inch higher than this tube here, and I've made a jig in the past out of 1x6s that just kind of hooks in that groove and sits on the table saw. Then I can put a sheet on it and slide it right through. Now, if I were to put that up here, I wouldn't be able to access the plywood there. When I was using that, I used my, there's a leg up, it's called. It's a swing thing here with a hook on it. You can't see the hook. And you can put a sheet on that, give it a push, and it flips right up onto the table saw, which is really nice, but it's still more effort than putting them here with the tractor. So that's how that goes. With that job complete, I have all of my strips of plywood piled outside the door here, and I've cleared off enough of the workbench that I can get the 8-foot piece between the blade and where the junk starts again. I had the presence of mind when I set up my radial arm saw to set it up flush with my workbench, so my workpiece will nicely fit on there and act as a side feed support. I've set my stop here at just longer than 20 5/8. I think I'm 20 3/4 here. Because again, you know, even as accurate as a radial arm saw is, I'm going to size everything on the table saw. So I'm making this cut very, very close, but I'm going to take the rest off at the table saw. This saw cuts the 6 frame covers just fine, but it does struggle for capacity to cut the 10 frames, but I have a trick I can use, and that will usually makes it actually cut off the 10 frame covers. So let's go with this big guy here. So you can see out of each 8-foot strip I get 4 covers and a little more than half a cover. So I can use 2 of the offcuts, do my shiplap thing, and glue and screw, and I can make another cover. So I get 4.5 covers in an 8-foot. So that means I get 4.5 6 frame covers and 8, 9 10 frame covers out of a sheet with very little waste, really. That's the extent of the 6-frame cover pieces. There's twice that many for 10 frames, and this is going to give me more parts than I need. So the fact that this one came right apart, and this one, well, I could probably use that, but there's, oh yeah, it's pretty bad. Oh yeah, look at that. So that's garbage, but that's okay. I've got more than I need here, and that's just the cull from the crappy plywood. Oh, I shouldn't say crappy plywood. It's definitely lower grade plywood, but you know, it is what it is. Okay, you saw that I only cut some of those 3 times because it occurred to me that I'm going to cut this anyway to size it. So I thought, well, you know, I'll just cut that and size it, and then I'll have that offcut for the ones I stitch together. If I in fact do that, because as stated, I'll have more pieces than I need. So there's no urgency on that. That'll likely go in the shed, and it'll be another day. And then I'll keep it for a couple of years, and then I'll burn it. So these, I need to size. They should be just, yeah, they're just an 1/8 over. So that's perfect. If there's a bad end, which there isn't on this one, I'll cut there, but otherwise, it's all I'm doing, just sizing these up. And I don't need to size them this way because that's sized after assembly, as long as I have one decent edge. Second verse, same as the first. However, remember I said that this saw doesn't have enough capacity to cut through a 10-frame cover? Well, because the blade is a circle, if I raise the workpiece up, I can take advantage of the fact that the blade will go farther toward me higher up. So I don't really have to raise the back, that's just fine. I just have to raise this side. And I've done this a number of times. It might look sketchy, but it actually works really well. It's very stable. I don't worry about this procedure at all. So we just move that down to the stop as usual and slice it across. Noisy. Okay, I got this much to trim and that much again. So We got a ways to go here, but I'll finish this today. It's a very bright and sunny day. It's -8 right now, and it's been very nice lately. Warmer than -8. It's been up to -1 the last few days, and I got my plywood cut here, so I'll be putting that away, and then we'll be moving on to cutting lumber soon. To, all the shims and cleats and all that sort of thing on the pallets and the covers. So, hope you enjoyed the plywood cutting video. To me, it's really not very interesting. So, sorry if I talk too much in it. I'm just kind of trying to make it interesting for you, because it's just something I take in stride and just do the work. And there was many hours of work that I didn't put in that video, but it's just through the saw, and rinse and repeat. Yeah, so I'm glad this project is progressing. I'll get that lumber cut up in the next, I don't know how long it'll take me. It'll probably take me a couple of weeks. And then we'll get into assembly. And we know assembly is going to take me probably 6 weeks to do all this. So I'm looking at late April again to finishing this off. Then we'll get it over to the dipper, and the customer can collect it there. Some of this equipment's for me. Some of it's for a second customer, which I'll bring back with me. The dipper is really good. I can go there and they'll dip smaller quantities while I wait. So that's nice. I can just load that back on the truck and bring it home. Yeah, so that's all I've got for now, and I appreciate you watching. Hope you have a really great weekend, and stay safe, take care, and have fun.